Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
It is getting more challenging to be a spokesperson for Israel in the diaspora. We will discuss this with Israeli speaker and advocate for Israel in the diaspora, Uri Goldflam. A former tour guide who was motivated to defend Israel after October 7, Uri is a historian and expert in the history of Israel. He's also an IDF paratrooper veteran. Uri is available to speak in North America on Israeli history and historical topics. His presentations dispel many of the misinformation and myths being propagated today about Israel. Uri, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you both.
Can you start by telling us what influenced you to make this, in effect, career switch to go from a tour guide to being a speaker?
So I'll let you in a secret. I'm still a tour guide, or that's I when people ask me, I'm telling them that's my day job. It wasn't a conscious choice. 2 years ago, we were looking into a fall season that was supposed to be a compensation for all the trials and tribulations of the COVID disaster, because tourism took a very, very dramatic hit back then too. And we were looking into a very, very full fall calendar. And when the war started on October 7th, it became very quickly we realized that the industry is once again is grinding down to complete halt. But unlike in COVID, where I had to wait for 4 or 5 months before figuring out what to do, at this time I realized that I can't wait that long. I started already right away on the 7th, talking to friends in the United States, and by October 8th, we were already planning my first speaking tour. I I realized that I won't be able to tell Israel's story here at home the way I am used to and the way I love. And so I decided to go on the road and tell Israel's story abroad. And so by November 23, I was already 3 weeks in the United States with a very successful speaking tour. And it was so successful, we decided to do it again and again and again. I just completed my eighth speaking tour, and I'm ready next week to go on my ninth.
And your audience is your audience Jewish abroad, or is it non-Jewish?
Most of my audience is not Jewish.
Okay.
I speak to non-Jewish audiences. I come with content and language and tools that they usually are not familiar with. But the audience I do speak to are friendly.
Yeah.
I speak to a lot of church groups. I speak to business networks. I speak at community centers, civic leaders. These are people that have a tendency, or at least an intuition, that Israel is on the right side of this equation, either for religious reasons. They're Christian Bible readers, and they understand that from a religious perspective, they believe in the divine of in the promise of the in the divine promise for the land, and that Israel is where it should be. Or for strategic reasons, they're allies of the United States. Israel is an ally of the U.S., and geostrategically, it makes sense for the states to support Israel. Or they intuitively understand that the people that are murdering families, raping, burning, and beheading babies are the bad guys, and that Israel is fighting the good fight. But they don't know how to mitigate that intuition that they feel inside with all the accusations against Israel they see outside.
Yeah.
And so they choose to remain silent. Or sometimes they choose what they consider to be the safe position, which is call for a ceasefire, right? Because to stop the war is a good thing, right? That's what they want. But they intuitively support Israel. They just don't know always why or how to talk about it, and they definitely don't know how to talk to their children who just come back from college with lots of funny ideas.
Yeah.
And so what I do is help them bridge that gap. I give them the language and the knowledge and the tools, the background and the context to the war, why it happened in the first place, where's Gaza, where's the West Bank, what's the difference, who's Hamas, What are their goals? What are their aims? What is Islamic Jihad? What is Iran doing with them? So I give them the basic tools to start understanding the reality on the ground and give them the knowledge to analyze or to be a little bit more critical about the information coming their way from their screens.
I think that's all very useful. What are the main myths about Israel that you're trying to dispel in your presentations and to give them the tools to dispel those myths when they come
That
across it?
that's a great question because there's so many, right? It seems like every day there's a new lie. Every day there's a new blood libel. Every day the accusation becomes more fantastical, and somehow it sticks. Like there will be a lot of people that will believe it. So where do you start? So I identified most of us in this in the sphere of advocacy identify the big three: genocide, colonialism, apartheid. Recently, we added also starvation into this list. But these are the big three lies told about Israel that I help unpack and debunk. But to be honest with you, that's not where I start. It's when we, and this is one of our biggest problems in advocacy, and a lot of people in the space share the same frustration. We spent 80, 90% of our time debunking myths and trying to unravel lies. Instead of telling our story, we are saying why the other guys are lying.
On the
Right?
defense. Yeah.
We spend all our time unpacking. I mean, they can throw out the most ridiculous things. And then we spent the rest of our time on the air or in engagement with whoever we're speaking with to try to unravel. And so I actually start a step backwards. Like, why is this campaign even happening? Why are they telling these lies? Especially this is very important especially for students on campus, once they understand that the propaganda campaign has been 50 years in the making. And our students now are in college are facing the culmination of 50 years of programming, of reprogramming the narrative and vilifying Israel. They suddenly understand that they're in a different place. They're in a much bigger, they understand the big picture, and that gives them much more strength and fuel to stand up to the lies. But it is really the vilification of Israel, genocide, apartheid, colonialism. These are accusations that are so terrible that if they're true, then defending Israel is impossible. Like
Yeah.
it's also it's Israel's indefensible. Like if
Yes.
these accusations are true, no defense that I put forward will be accepted. A lot of Israelis like to talk about high tech and cherry tomatoes and drip irrigation and all the wonderful things that Israel brought to the world, and all the beautiful people in Tel Aviv and gay pride parade and how if the accusation of genocide, apartheid, and colonialism is true, then none of those things matter. They don't matter. And so that's where we have to start. The vilification of Israel has effectively rendered all our defenses completely irrelevant. If we allow this to exist, these lies to persist and be accepted, then Israel has no right to exist, no matter how many inventions and flash drives and algorithms we invented.
So I have two questions for you. One is, how do you deal with this vilification then in your presentations? And the second question is, if you would be the secretary of information, the secretary of information war of the state of Israel, how would you spend the budget on this?
Hmm. Wow. So that's a, those are great questions. So, like I said, in my presentations, a step backwards. I try to outline the general campaign of delegitimization against Israel. because it's within that framework of the delegitimization campaign that these accusations are then presented. And so if people understand that we are in a delegitimization campaign, then they have a okay, so I can deal with this now, and they were able to find the backbone to stand up to these accusations. And then it's just there are no shortcuts. You have to go down to the nitty-gritty. And in each one of these accusations, I have a set of slides where I unpack the idea of genocide. First of all, I define what genocide is, and then show how the definition does not match the events that are unfolding in Israel. And then I show what genocide actually is, how it looks on a graph, the decline in population. And I show several different real genocides. The Armenians, the Khmer Rouge, the countries in Africa, the Hindus in Kashmir, the Armenians, and of course the Jews in Europe, and how that looks on a graph when the decline in population occurs. And then I contrast that with the increase in population of the Palestinian population in Israel from 1948 until today, including a little line in 1967, and you can see that there's an uptick in the quality of life and an increase in the population. And so I showed that it doesn't fit at all. The numbers don't lie, and the graphs don't lie. And using the term genocide is just simply a way to vilify Israel and not to actually accuse it of a real crime. I then go into the numbers of the casualties of the Gaza war, compare them to the wars that occur in the Middle East and Africa and other parts of the world in the last 10, 15 years to show that even if you take the numbers that are reported by Hamas, which are, as we all know, are inaccurate, but even if we accept them as accurate, then the conflict in Gaza, the absolute numbers, and especially if it's combat to non-combatant ratio, then the conflict in Gaza is actually a very small one compared to other ones. So the accusations of genocide don't really match. Still, people use that word, and again, if you understand that this is a vilification campaign, it's now understandable and it can be debunked more easily. Similarly to the other accusations, when it comes to colonialism, I have a long set of slides. I usually don't go through all of them because also it's a lot of information to go over Jewish history in the land of Israel in a 12-minute bit section of my lecture is a bit not serious. But you really have to make an effort. You really have to make an effort and go through intellectual gymnastics to make a point that the Jewish people are colonizers in the land of Israel. Like really, it really takes a special effort, especially again, I have slides that go back to the time of pharaohs in 12th century BC. I am a tour guide and I have quite a lot of background in history and archaeology. I talk about the first temple and the times of the Bible and the second temple and the exit of Babylon. We sing a little bit of the by the rivers of Babylon before we move on to Hanukkah and the Greeks and the Romans and the birth of Jesus, a Jewish child in Judean Bethlehem, born in 2,000 years ago. And again, you really have to make an effort to make the claim that the Jews are colonizers in Judea. That section I finish with Emperor Adrian in the second century. I'm doing a very big disservice here. I want to tell you and your listeners, I'm doing a huge disservice to Jewish history. Uh,
No, of
Jewish
course,
Jewish
of course.
history needs to be learned over a long period of time in a full academic course, and you still won't get through everything. But in the second century, I tell my audiences about Emperor Adrian and how he
So
came to
you're
squash.
basically saying we're not newcomers in the land of
Correct.
Israel. Right.
And not only that, but Emperor Adrian came to squash the Bar Kokhba revolt. He killed 500,000 to 700,000 Jews. Again, he committed a real genocide against Jews, and then expelled all the rest of them to the rest of the world. And he didn't stop there because he's the one that changed the name Judea. He erased the name Judea and wrote the name Palestine on the Roman maps, and that's where the name comes from. The name Palestine is a Roman name. It's the name of the colonizers. of Judea. And that is the name that continued to be used, especially by Europeans until today. And so I try to I turn that accusation on its head. Not only are the Jews not the colonizers, but the indigenous people of the land, but all those that came after, including the Muslim conquerors, they are the colonizers. So again, we try to not only debunk and be defensive, it's very important also to be able to tell our story. To tell our story and you can call it go on the offensive. I don't like to use those terms, but telling our story is as important as debunking the lies. And finally, apartheid. You really, again, here's another intellectual exercises that has to be very um, nimble in order to make the accusations of apartheid stick. You have to have a functioning brain and two eyes and 5 minutes, 5 minutes on an Israeli street, any Israeli street, to understand the accusation of apartheid is completely ludicrous and rejected completely. So I have a slide about that as well. But by now, the audience understands that this is a campaign of vilification. It's a campaign of distortion of reality. And once we understand that, it is much easier to debunk many of these myths.
So, as the hypothetical
The second
minister
question.
of information war,
Ah,
how would you deal with this disinformation campaign of that's going on already for 50 years now,
yeah,
and that is actually moving numbers in Western electorates who
yeah,
influence Western politicians towards
yeah.
Israel
So
negatively?
my answer is, as all Israelis like to do, divided into three. First of all, we have to do better telling our story. So we have to invest in Jewish education. The fact
Yes.
that the fact that American Jews, the young generation of American Jews today don't know to tell their own story. Not just the story of Israel, the story of Jews in America. How did the Jews get to America? Who were they? How did they end up in Ellis Island between 1892 and 1921? What happened in 19? Why don't American Jews know their own story? And they need to be able to tell, we have to invest in Jewish education to young Jews in America to feel good about or be knowledgeable about their own history and tell the story of Israel better. So that's number one. That's one third of the budget. Another third of the budget is to expose this campaign. We need to expose the actors and the countries that are behind this campaign of vilification and delegitimization. And again, it didn't start 2 years ago. It didn't start on October 7th. On October 8th, I don't know if your audience, if your viewers have seen the documentary October 8. Uh, it
Yes.
didn't start on October 8th. The signs were ready and already printed before. This is a campaign that started 50 years ago. It started 50 years ago with the Soviet Union. It started in the Cold War when the world was divided between East and West, and Israel was made by the Soviets the domino case, the first domino in the case against the West to put a divide between Israel and the Western world, to make it the lightning rod for all the accusations against the West, imperialism and colonialism and supremacy and all these. None of this is new. None of the words that we're seeing today are new. The Soviets used this 50 years ago. Today, they're doing a much better job than the Soviets did, but it's the same methodology. It's the same language. And then moving on to the infusion of funds into universities, into creating entire faculties and professorships and scholarships. The whole epistemology around the way data is organized, the way knowledge is organized, the way research is done is based on these studies of professors that are appointed by these actors that create a narrative that puts Israel as the epitome of Western colonialism, Western imperialism, white supremacy that has to be dismantled.
Who are these
And if
actors
that's
that put these professors there?
It's there's funds from Qatar, there's funds from China, there's funds from Russia, there's funds from Iran, and they're creating a lot of these faculties. I mean it's not this is not my own research. There's a lot have been written about this about how Qatar is spending a lot of money purchasing up media outlets and academia. And the media that echoes many of the same language and sentiment, which is creating this narrative, which puts Israel and the Jews to be the lightning rod of all that's wrong with the West. But Israel has become that thing that everybody accuses the West of. By the way, this is also part of it. We are educating our own young generation to hate their own culture and their own civilization and their own country. These forces are not only anti-Israel, they're anti-American, they're anti-Western. So we need to spend time and money exposing these connections and exposing this matrix and this infrastructure, which is subverting our very way of life in Western society. And the third element is building bridges with communities and societies that we haven't until now. One of the reasons that we are talking now is because I was on a tour in the United States recently, and I spoke at 7 cities with Hindu audiences. We invited Hindu and Jewish audiences to come together to hear about each other's story. uh, I was shocked. I was shocked to learn that the Hindu story, is very similar to the Jewish story.
Yes.
Very similar. They use the same words, the genocide and expulsion um, and uh, uh, and oppression. They experience this in their country. We experience this out of our country. But it's a similar story in both ancient civilizations, 3,000 and 4,000 years old, and both suffered as the kind of outlier, a cultural outlier in lands that are previously conquered or currently conquered by Islam. And the stories are very similar, and they're natural allies. We talk about the numbers. A lot of people say, "Oh, we can't win. We can't win the PR war because the numbers don't add up. There are 15 million Jews in the world and 2 billion Muslims, and the algorithm favors the numbers." We have allies. We have allies that number in the billions, and we need to build those bridges and not be afraid to build new bridges and reach out to new communities and create allies that will be long lasting and strong, and not where we have looked in the past. Unfortunately, our recent experience has shown that too many too many Jews have put their trust in liberal and progressive causes, believing that they will come to our aid when the time comes, and the time came, and they didn't.
No.
And
No.
so I think that's a very important lesson for us to learn. So
Yes.
that's my long answer to your short question.
Wonderful. So when you say building bridges, you're not saying build bridges with your with the people who are negative about Israel. You're saying
No, absolutely not.
build
So
bridges with those who suffer from the same mechanisms that the Jews suffer from.
we have natural allies in North America. The Hindu community is one of them, but also the Christian community. I've most of my presentations, most of my talking tours and my speaking tours have been to Christian audiences. I spend a lot of time in churches in the last 2 years, speaking to men and women who love Israel and genuinely care for Jews, and also with a very clear eye understand the threat. Many of these radical elements talk about, first they're going to come for the Saturday people, and then they come for the Sunday people.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about all Muslims. I'm talking about that 25-35% of the Muslim population, which is radical, which believes in Islamism and are well, jihadists. It's not everybody. Most of the Muslims that I've met and known are kind, lovely people who want to live good lives and be good neighbors. But at least 1/3 of them are radicalized, and they pose a tremendous threat to our way of life, and that includes this whole coalition. We used to say Judeo-Christian value system, but I want to suggest to you and to your viewers to start talking about the Jewish, Judeo-Christian Dharmic civilizations. Between, if you think about the map of the Middle East, or from Morocco to Indonesia, is mostly Muslim, except for little Israel and India. That's it.
Yeah.
And India as a civilization are also very much in line with our way of life, with freedoms and liberties, and prosperity, as well as the Western world. So we have allies. We have to shake off our natural resistance to staying closed in our communities. Um, Reach out to Christian friends, reach out to Hindu friends, and others, by the way, not only them. There are a lot of people that again, like I said, when they look at the world, I end my presentation with a slide of what the world order is now becoming. The world order is unfolding in front of us, and we have a choice. The world that we leave our children and the world in which our grandchildren will grow up will look one of two choices. Either it's the despots, the autocrats, the dictators, the jihadists that rule the world, or set the tone in the world. These are people that subjugate minorities, that oppress women and gays, and don't believe in religious freedoms and liberties, and promote chaos and death and destruction. Or, as flawed as they are, Western democracies and their allies, not only Western countries, South American countries, moderate Arab countries, and Asian countries that choose life and liberty and freedom and equality. Uh, and again, not without their flaws, but they are based in our Judeo-Christian dharmic values and civilization. And we have a choice, and we must take a stand, because if we don't, the silent majority, as it was true in Germany, you know that only 9% of Germans were Nazis. That's it. Only 9% of the Germans were Nazis. What about the rest of them? The silent majority is irrelevant.
Let me ask a question now. How has your speech changed since October 7th?
So, oh wow, you guys ask great questions. When I started, everything was we were all in emergency mode. Right. So at the very, very beginning, I spent a lot of time talking about the background to the conflict. Where is Gaza? Where's the West Bank? Who is Hamas? What's the difference between them? How were the borders set? So I went through 48, 67, 79, and the withdrawal from Gaza in 2005. So I try to set the stage geographically and historically to understand the eruption of the war. Then I talked about the actors, like who is Hamas? What is their agenda? What is their goal? What is their ideology? And only then I arrived at October 7th, at the events of October 7th themselves. I don't share atrocities. I don't show the terrible images that we all have seen. I do show websites where people can access them, and I ask them not to. Okay, so the reason for us to have this information is because one day we will meet people who will deny it ever happened. And then we will have the tools, we'll have the
Yeah,
website to sit them down and show them exactly what happened.
yeah,
And then when we go through the impact, the last part of the lecture is the impact of October 7th. And I show how the impact of October 7th is what I call a paradigm shifting event. It changed the way Israelis look at the world around them. It changed all the assumptions, all the presuppositions, and all the policy relevant decision matrix that guides the way we look at the world. And I show that on the local level. So for Israelis and Palestinians, how October 7th changed everything. On the regional level, so Iran, its proxies, and the war that began to unfold back then with Hezbollah and Houthis and Iraq, Syria, and Iran, and on the global stage, and how the new global order, the clash of civilizations, is now occurring. My point is that the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza is not the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. I mean, that is part of it, but it's the tip of the spear. It's the tip of the iceberg. The war that's unfolding is really a much larger civilizational war. And Israelis are very, very well aware, acutely aware, that they are fighting a war for the West, that
Yeah.
they are the front line of a global war for our Western way of life, which is why the moral abandonment of Israel by its Western allies was so terribly hurtful. Um, and so I come to close again to talk about anti-Semitism. This civilizational breakdown is epitomized in the explosion of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the lightning rod. It's the scapegoating of the Jews is the beginning of the breakdown of cultural and society. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has a wonderful, wonderful presentation about this, where he talks about anti-Semitism. And so my point is that my audience, again, remember I talk to non-Jews, that I charge them to stand up against anti-Semitism, but not because it's helpful to Jews.
It's
Nobody goes
hurtful
to
to
war.
them.
Correct. Nobody goes to war to save Jews. Nobody ever went to war to save Jews. And in World War II, the Americans, the Brits joined the war to save themselves and to fight for themselves, not to save Jews. But when anti-Semitism is erupting in this way, standing up against anti-Semitism is Western self-defense. It's
Yes.
not it's not for the Jews. It's for you. It's for our entire civilizational way of life. So that's how I started. That was the beginning of the war. And as I traveled again and again and again, I found that there's a greater need to talk about the lies and the myths because the lies were starting to become terribly uh, terribly bad, and big. And the vilification campaign was like it was unbelievable and was starting to be repeated on media. And when I called people to ask if they want to book me for a speaking event, I felt I felt the resistance. They
Yeah.
know me, they love me, they want me to come, but they can't justify this to the people because the accusation because genocide. Right? How can they bring a genocide supporter to talk to their congregation? So it was a tough, it's a really tough barrier to break. And so I began talking more about the vilification campaign. I had a lecture called "How to Talk About the Conflict." This was also a workshop I did for students in different universities and campuses. I developed material. I'm happy to share it with you if you want. It's on my website. It's PDF that are free to download about different topics. Like I said, apartheid, colonialism, genocide, anti-Semitism, West Bank, international law, all these big words. I have PDFs that break them down and with talking points that are understandable. And that brought me towards the end of this period where I am now. I now talk less about the war itself and more about the lessons learned from the war. My new presentation is called Three Introductions to a New World Order, where I try to analyze the lessons learned, or three of the main lessons learned from the war in Gaza, the last 2 years of war, and how these lessons for the West must be understood in order to face the challenges ahead. Because I believe we maybe have ended one war. Maybe. I'm not so sure this war is over yet, but the big battle is still ahead of us.
Absolutely.
What did you feel you can achieve as a speaker? Is there hope for changing people's negative
I think
perspective
so.
on Israel?
I think so because you know we I met hundreds, thousands of people. And this goes back to what I said before, thousands of people that either love Israel because they're Bible readers and they love the Word of God, or they understand that Israel is fighting a battle of good and evil, and Israel is in the side of good. I mean, they understand this intuitively. But they don't have the language and the knowledge and the tools to talk about it. And so many times, so I've spoken dozens of places. People come up to me after and tell me, thank you for giving me the language and the tools to actually be able to speak about this. And so, yes, I do believe that we are moving the needle. One of the biggest deficits and my criticisms against the Israeli PR efforts, whatever they are, they don't really exist, but whatever they are, they'll go to the usual suspects. You'll find them. You'll find the emissaries and the consulates in the large Jewish centers, and that makes sense. But they don't go out to the place where they're non-Jews. There are hardly any Jews, but there are a lot of non-Jews who want to support Israel. Um, and I believe that they are the silent majority. And we need to make the effort to move the silent majority out of their silence, one church at a time, and get there. We can. This can be done. I reject the notion that we are alone, that
Mm-mm.
we are without friends, that that's something that in Israel is a very popular saying. Israel is all alone. Everybody hates us. No, I don't think that's right. That's true. And we need to make the effort to get out to those people and educate them.
And so I think that you would like to say to our listeners, be those people who go out. I know that my dear friend Susie, who hosted you in the Jewish Hindu, she was not looking forward to that talk until she heard you and she said, wow, you have to have him on the show. He's amazing and what he knows. And so I really do think that we have to go out to allyship, if that's the rather than just sticking with our small Jewish communities.
Yes.
And I would highly, highly encourage anyone listening to this podcast today to say, well, who do I know in some other community, meaning a non-Jewish one? Can I host in my house a gathering
Right.
of people? And you know, stones to the
Yeah.
ripple
Yeah.
effect.
There's a ripple effect, and even if you get to one person, all you need to get is that one person who around the coffee station at work, when somebody throws out casually the word genocide or apartheid or starvation, they'll be able to say, actually, that's not true. That's not true. Be careful with that word. It's okay to disagree about the policy or have a feeling about the war, but genocide it is not. So let's be careful with her. And all you need is that one person to be able to stand up in the office to change the whole atmosphere, and that's what we need to do. I uh, I truly believe this. As
Well,
our
thank
sages said, "Lo alecha hamelacha ligmor." It is not upon us to complete the task. "Aval ein ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena." But it's not permitted for us to refrain from doing it.
And with those words of wisdom, Uri, I thank you so much. This has been just what I expected it to be, meaning a very informative and entertaining, even though it's not an entertaining subject.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to remind you and your audiences that I still prefer to have you here in Israel on your next visit. So now is the time to start planning your next visit to Israel.
And
Hopefully soon. Yeah.
and for those of you, I think, our listeners, for those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and myself and our activities, you can go to nevergetisnowpodcast.com and look us up and see what we're doing. And without crying, because anyway, it's just it's just
emotional.
so much work that we have to do. I will say, please, everyone, whenever you can, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.